first time in Chile, so everything is very new. I arrived in Santiago after really fast running to the Atacama Desert to see actually ALMA, so the Center for Microwave, this big satellite that gets microwaves. So I came here, and when I was at the hostel, there was everybody picking me up, and we were in a car, and then we had the talk in university, and it's been a very, very, very busy program. But I met a lot of people, very smart people, and what I really like about the festival, and I think this is really important in festivals in general, but I think everywhere in the world, some people only get it, and other festivals really don't understand that, is that a festival is not just, for giving the content, but for creating an environment. So where people can conversate, where they can eat together, where they can have time. So it's not just attacking people with content, but it's about making a space where there is a space for conversation, for meeting, for, like having a workshop, but then also hanging out. And in Proceso, the error, I hope I'm saying it correctly, I think the organizers are very aware that it's very important to create this space, and they do it by also giving some time to have good food, and it's been really, really useful in that sense, because it's given me also a space to get, conversations back, to reflect, to see how I can, change the content for this environment. So it's been really, really beautiful, and we still have a little bit of time. So. I think I call myself mostly a researcher. So a lot of the work that I create is out of stuff that I read, and then I'm trying to convey the knowledge that I find translated into different stories, often about compression actually. So in terms of like the materials I use, it's a lot of compressions, but then about compressions or with compressions, but then the subjects that I try to translate often are also something else, so it's a combination. So in recent work it was indeed about like color test cards. Color test cards, the main problems with them are that it's always an objectified white female. So it's actually a cluster of problems in this sense. Also a lot of my research is centered around resolutions. So trying to uncover actually more like what is being, or what gets lost in the complexities of technologies, like the assemblage of technology makes something possible, but it also compromises other ways of working. So a lot of the work I'm doing now is trying to uncover what this word that we use on a daily basis in many, many different contexts, the word resolution, what does it actually mean in technology? Yeah. So so those are just two examples of subjects that I work with, and I try to kind of describe and come at them via the method of compression as a material. Yeah, so as I said, I think resolution really means something else in different contexts. You have resolution as something in law, then you resolve a conflict resolution. You have resolution in terms of music, image resolutions, but what I am getting at in terms of resolution is I've tried to uncover first what is an optical resolution, so that's really the precision of the image, where how far can you zoom in until something is not visible anymore, for instance, or what is visible and what is just invisible, and what do you need to create this. But optics is actually something very simple. You have an object that you're viewing, you have a lens, you have the light or the air that's in between. If we're taking this kind of understanding of resolution to the technical realm, there is actually many more actors at stake. It's not just the lens or the light or the thing that we're watching. No, it's also the software that we're watching it through, the languages that we're encoding our data in, the operating system, the hardware, etc., etc., etc. So there's many more layers that add complexity to what is a resolution. But finally, the final resolution is just often simplified or obscured as just an amount of pixels. But actually what you're seeing is the outcome of a long process. The process of resolving the image. And so what I'm trying to do is trying to explain how these processes develop, why they're working in a particular way, and again, what is compromised. But also, how do our technologies work, but how do they not work? Like, it's a shame that we can only make or compress video in 4 corners. It's a shame that we can only choose to write our images away via specific hue values that are embedded within a compression, or this kind of like researching and how artists can kind of like break open these systems again and maybe make new things possible. So in general, the word compression would refer to making things smaller. In effect, in technology, it's not always the case. If you compress something, something can also expand. If you look at how much something weighs in terms of kilobytes or whatever, certain compressions actually add like a weight to the file, you know? But maybe that's besides the point. What compression means to me is a technology that has been built by a human being. Not one, often it's a group of people, and very often it's a group of white men in California. So what it means is it's a group of people that come at organizing the data of an image, of a sound, of a video, of anything really, but putting it into a particular order for a particular means to use this piece of data. And that means there is a certain bias involved in the compression. Like, there's many ways to come at it, but for me what compression means, like any other piece of technology, is it's made by humans that have made it to function via a particular way, and also always not in another way. And so I'm researching compressions in terms of what are also the compromises, let's say. Rheology, I got to that word because the software that Vade wrote, which is called Siphon, which is about like siphoning fluids, but in case of what he does, he's making this tool that builds bridges between different softwares. So it's what's normally not possible. This piece of software creates kind of like a bridge from one software to the next to live input this stream of data to the next. So he uses the word siphon, and I thought, like, actually if we're talking about data in general, we should also consider what it would mean if data would be more fluid. I often like to say, like, what would it mean to listen to a rainbow? You would hear it in a different way. You would understand that maybe certain bands take more space because, I don't know, because color reacts in a certain way. So by listening to particular data, you perceive something else than when you look at it. It's because our ears and our eyes work different. Our ears are good at, rhythm, understanding rhythm. Our eyes are good at understanding spatiality. And so I think if we would just practice more, say, the fluidity of data, so the plasticity of putting one string of data or one string of information even into a next environment, we would learn to perceive it in another way, which could also really give us a new perspective. That sounds really abstract, but consider that, say for instance, cancer research wants to understand how a cancer grows. They cannot only understand the cancer growing in space, they need to understand if there's a particular rhythm to the growth, maybe because it responds to a particular rhythm of that human being, like if it's a female and the cancer is connected to her menstrual cycle, then you would hear that probably, that connection easier if you would play the growth of the cancer than if you would look at, I don't know how many scans, you wouldn't see, So there is a reason to understand strings of data via different modes of perception, because you will understand them, you will read them in new ways, and that gives you a new perspective. So I think as a researcher I'm trying to open up ways of perception. I think that's the main act of, and also for an artist, I think that's where artistic research really blossoms. It's like, researching modes of perception. And so I think if you do this via a rheology, this plasticity of data, not follow the rules of your operating system all the time, then you really open a completely new territory. And I like this. So the last work I have made was, it's actually kind of old. I was a bit on a break, let's say. It's called DCT siphoning. So in this case it's actually about explaining what is DCT, and DCT is like at the basis of the JPEG compression algorithm. Because JPEG is the most used compression algorithm in the world still, even though it's like more than 2 decades old, almost 3 decades now. We don't really ever learn about how this works, but it influences us on a daily basis. It cuts away pieces of data. So I was really interested in explaining how this compression algorithm works, also realizing that there's more complex algorithms and also less complex algorithms. I'm really trying to make it interesting to people, but it's very abstract. It's like a mathematical story, and so I was thinking all the time like I can make these like abstract works about abstract mathematical concepts, and 5 people in the world will see it and they'll say great. But you will not really teach anybody anything, because it's just like it's not attractive, let's say. So one way I think to make work is to make it interesting to people is to add something that humans can feel they can understand. In this case I did it by anthropomorphizing the compression algorithm. So I made the compression algorithm as the protagonist, and then the video or the environment is these compression algorithms going from one space to the next, and they are like talking, but not really talking, they're like compressing how they experience the different complexities of compression algorithms. So they go from pixels to a world of lines, and then they're in their own environment where these T blocks come from. It's like a block environment, wavelets, and then they go into a space that they have no understanding of, and that's like some kind of vector land. So it's a story that I've borrowed from Flatland in a sense, but now we're not talking about the different spaces of Euclid spaces, but we're talking about different complexities in compressions. What I think, what I learned coming from theory, right, because I have a complete theory background. My teacher once said like, Rosa, you're not a theorist at all. You're actually an artist, and I want you to perform in my festival. And this was like the first time I ever played anything, and it was super scary. But I learned actually that by combining different discourses, so the discourse of theory, the discourse of telling stories, but also visual and etc., you trigger people from different angles. And not everybody likes to read, not everybody likes to be triggered visually or is triggered, not everybody likes to think in compression, let's say. Almost nobody likes, but if you combine them, you draw in a bigger audience, because there is something there for somebody, you know, like it gives a bit more variety to the work. So I think in a sense it's also like a trick. A nasty, cheap trick. Just put everything in there and cook it. The criticism came from a talk I was invited to give in Basel, Heck. It was for me to explain where the newer media are, and then my question became like, so okay, I have to talk about what are newer media when I don't even know what are new media. I mean, there's people that have written about what are new media, like you have Levmanovic in 2001, the Bible that now people like to just criticize. Galloway, in his book, I believe it's like The Interface Effect, he also criticizes Manovich, and he gives his own kind of perspective what are new media. But none of them are talking about what are newer media. And I still feel like I don't even know what are new media, but I do know that there's a lot of computation in my life, everywhere. Whether that's old or new, I don't care. I think what for me makes something new is that, it gives something that I haven't seen, that I have not really the language for always to, approach completely. So for me, where newer media are where you can find new resolutions, which means where there are combinations of media, let's say, that are actors that involve media or mediating that are not normally supposed to work together, or that normally don't work together. So for me, newer media involve like the explorations of resolutions that not necessarily exist yet. And with that I mean from an artistic point of view, right? One of the examples that I gave was the Nova drone, which is a synthesizer by Casper Electronics. He has this, it just does a simple sinus wave through an LED, a light emitting diode, so a little light. The little light flickers really fast, it flickers faster than an iPhone camera actually writes away its frames. And so you cannot film it. So there is a problem between these two media, the little light and the camera's CCD chip. That's the chip that receives the information. What it does, it's not, the process of resolving doesn't function properly. So these two actors cannot resolve it in a proper way, which means there is a new resolution there. It's an interpretation between two media that are not supposed to function together, but they try, and what comes out is a newer object. And then this newer medium is like an assemblage of the synthesizer versus this iPhone, making a new visual resolution, let's say. So for me, what are new media, what are newer media, it's hard to say, but I think that's like somewhere I like to take this question to. In terms of my relation to post-digital or post-internet, which is something quite different, but as I said, there's media everywhere, and people still like to make like the difference between this is a digital machine and this is an analog book. But if I would pick up many of the books here, I'm sure especially behind me, where is the sci-fi part, a lot of it will be about computation, about screens, about calculations. So a lot, whether it's like direct or indirectly, also involves digital technologies. It's part of the language, even though these books are all just written and not digital. They involve thoughts now that are digital. So it's no longer a discourse that stands alone. No, it's part of our everyday life. Even if we don't touch a computer, we're touched by the computer culture. And so what post-digital stands for is like, look, if you're trying to make a divide between what is digital and what is not digital, you're actually making a virtual reality, because that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. They're completely together. Our ways of thinking, our ways of organizing our days are now also involving digital technologies. Whether we even live on, like, let's say, whether we live on the street or not. I don't want to make the biggest generalization of the world, but most people in the world will be influenced by this on a daily basis. I don't remember if I answered the question right now, but
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you a lot. I'm so happy.